Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Herp Monday number 31 and we have a good one for you today. This one is very near and dear to my heart. It is near and dear to most of the people in the heart of Texas or the hill country. Today we are going to be talking about the Texas blind salamander. Texas blind salamander, or scientific name Eurecia rathbuni. Again, that is Eurecia rathbuni. It is part of the family Plethodontidae, which again, as we've discussed almost with all salamanders that we've talked about, these are the lungless salamander. Now, you might notice something odd. These are very pale. Well, that is because these are troglobite species, meaning that they are karst. Again, throwing some more scientific words at you, cave dwelling. So these species are your cave dwelling salamanders. That is why they have this real pale skin, and we'll get into that. They are native only to the San Marcos pool of the Edwards Aquifer. They are found nowhere else in the world. Only in the San Marcos spring complex is where they have been found. They are obviously very adapted to live in underground streams and caves. Many are pretty deep and inaccessible to modern day science. They are found, where they are found above ground, they are found in very deep pools with very minimal current, and they must have a constant temperature. The temperature seems to be between 21 and 22 degrees Celsius, which that's about 70 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. So they really need for that water to really stay in that very small window. They were first found in 1895 from a newly constructed well that pulled water from 58 meters or 190 feet below the surface. So that means that there were salamanders 58 meters, 200 feet below the surface of the ground. So that tells you how far these can actually live down in the ground and how much caves there probably are in there. Because while these are not a necessarily large salamander, in fact, size for the Texas blind salamander is between 3.5 to 5.5 inches. So that's 9 to 14 centimeters. But that's still pretty significant when you think about what you would expect underground to look like, especially that far down. Now, these do have, as you can very plainly tell, a very broad, flat snout and head. These things are very adapted to squeezing into cracks, to rooting through sediment, with these long, thin legs. They do have a thin tail, and that is where most of their length actually comes from, is actually from their tail, or about half and half. Definitely a significant portion. They do have the costal grooves, which help with them absorbing oxygen from the water. But obviously, the best way for them to get oxygen from the water is very obviously these external gills. That does mean that these are a Neotenic salamander. Neotenic means that they retain sort of larval traits throughout their entire life. So most of the time when salamanders give birth and the larvae, they'll have these external gills, and then they'll grow into a terrestrial form which will lose those gills. These living in an aquifer, which aquifer is underground water, is going to be they're going to retain those gills. But you might be noticing something. Where are the eyes? It's a very good question. These have vestigial eyes. Vestigial means they are essentially worthless. They can sense light apparently, but they're essentially useless. In fact, they're even covered by skin. It would make sense that these don't have usable eyes because they are living underground, and they live exclusively underground, unless they happen to get pulled up by the spring. They do not do it by choice. They don't come out by choice. At least it doesn't seem that way. They seem to be much more preferable to staying underground. Now, these are an active predator, and chances are they are the top predator in the underground sort of biosphere. Probably not a lot of things bigger than them, probably not a lot of things that are eating them. They are probably the top predator in there. They are probably going to eat snails, shrimps, any sort of invertebrates, maybe smaller salamanders. Just not a whole lot known, but they probably do eat snails and shrimp. That's probably the majority of their diet. They are an endangered species, being found only in one location. The simple fact is we just don't know about this species. We just really don't know. We don't know if there's millions of them underground. We don't know if there's 12. That's an over-exaggeration, but we just really don't know. An interesting fact, though, about them being an endangered species, they were one of the first species put on the endangered species list. I believe that was 1965. I believe is when they was, but they were one of the very first animal species to be put on the list. So that tells you kind of how known these species are and how important they are for people to. So, really important. People use them. Now, why are they endangered? Well, they're endangered because, again, we're not entirely sure, but there is very, very real problems with the groundwater of Texas. Over pumping, too many people pumping too many water. Basically, too many straws in a glass of water, and eventually you're gonna have to make a choice. There is also a chance for groundwater pollution, things leaching into the groundwater. These are things that are very real concern, and it should be of a human concern because the Edwards Aquifer, which is where these are found, is actually a primary drinking water source for like the city of Austin, San Marcos, San Antonio. These are very important water systems just for us as humans to survive. But being a unique species in an extremely unique system, the San Marcos spring system is incredibly diverse, but it is incredibly unique. It's got Texas rice, the blind salamander, just a lot of animals and insects that are found nowhere else in the world and only found in like the deep caves. Definitely something. Now, as far as the interesting fact that we are going to do, and it's kind of a long one, but we are going to talk about their reproduction. And it seems that their reproduction is year-round, which I thought was very interesting. I never thought of that, but since they are deep underground in caves, there's not really a reason for them to have a seasonality reproduction. The birds and the bees in the spring, and the deer and the other mammals in the fall. These just kind of seem whenever the mood strikes them, is one way to put it. But, how do they breed? Well, this was actually one of something interesting. There hasn't been a lot known about them, obviously, because there's just not been many that we've been able to observe. However, there was a scientist that observed some courtship bouts in captive specimens. And in those, the female actually initiated the courtship and the male just remained passive. So that's actually very interesting. Usually it seems to be in reptiles and amphibians, the males will really try to attract females and be very active. In this one, it really seems that the females. And how it seemed to begin is the female would approach the male and rub her chin on his dorsum. And then the female might also rub her body on nearby rocks to release some sort of pheromones or something. We're not sure. If the male did not respond, the female seemed to nip at the male. So nibble or bite the male along the sides. And then if that didn't work, kicking the gravel. Just kicking gravel at him, basically. Eventually, the female will straddle the male and then rub her snout on him. The male will respond, and they'll sort of just kind of vibrate together, and then the male will lay a spermatophore into the substrate, and then will bring the female over the top of it until she will pick up the spermatophore. And remember, a spermatophore is a small sac that holds a bunch of sperm the female will take up into her body. Super interesting. Don't really know about it. But finally, the really important fact that we really want to get into. The San Antonio Zoo, which is my home zoo, in 2020 had the first ever successful hatching of Texas blind salamander. That shows that we can do it. They're looking at all sorts of other water quality parameters and, trying to get these out of there. But that way, if this salamander does become in trouble, we have a way to bring them back. But it is huge and exciting news that, once again, I'm just going to say it because it's just so awesome. The San Antonio Zoo in 2020 had the first ever successful hatching of Texas blind salamander. And they have been trying to do it for a really long time. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you again. If I don't, please be safe. Have a great day. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you do, I'd really appreciate it, and I hope to see you again. Yeah, nothing else to say. Hope you're enjoying the series. I know I am. And yeah, take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones. And